I wanted to share my thoughts on the First Berserker Khazan, as I spent 4 hours playing this game, this demo, and I've completed it, in fact twice, from start to finish. This game is a great way to start playing Souls-like games. While it's not as an amazing games like Dark Souls, Bloodborne or Elden Ring, it still is a very fun introduction to this sorts of types of games. Now, the First Berserker Khazan, you play as a warrior who was imprisoned and then possessed by a phantom. The story is about how you try to get rid of this phantom while traveling throughout the dangerous world. The game's story isn't exactly complicated, but it still works well with its gameplay. The world is dark and mysterious, quite inspired by the other Souls-like games such as Lies of P, Sekiro, Black Myth Wukong and Dark Souls. These inspirations make the game's world feel familiar, but yet also unique. The best thing about this game is that it's perfect for the people who want to try Souls-like games, but feel intimidated by how hard they can be. This game simplifies a lot of the tricky systems that other games in the genre have. If you always wanted to try Souls-like games but thought they were pretty much too difficult, the First Berserker Khazan may be a good start to at least to experience it for the first time. One thing that stands out about this game is its leveling system. It's much simpler compared to the other Souls-like games. In many of games of this type, you have lots of stats and attributes to manage, which can be confusing for new players, but in this game there are only 5 attributes to choose from, and everything is explained pretty much clearly. This makes it easy to understand how leveling up works and what does it do for your character. Now, during my playthrough, I focused on building a dual-wielding character. My weapons worked best with the willpower attribute, so I put most of my points into that. By the end of my demo runs, I had maxed out a lot of my willpower and just all my attributes more or less up to like 20 level. Now this build felt really balanced and strong, and it seemed like the developers had designed the game with its playstyle in mind. Now, if you try a different build, like using slower weapons or playing as a tank, your experience might be a little bit different. But the game gives you the freedom to experiment and find what works best for you. The gameplay of the First Berserker Khazan will feel familiar if you played other Souls-like games. You will explore different areas, fight challenging enemies, and use checkpoints to save your progress. These checkpoints let you level up and reset enemies in the area. Each time you rest at the checkpoint, all the enemies come back, so you need to think carefully about when and where to rest. The combat is one of the best parts of the game. It's smooth, fun, and not too hard to learn. Even though I've played pretty much a lot of Souls-like experiences, I still found the combat in this game, well, pretty easy to get into. 2 key mechanics make the combat stand out. There's the perfect parrying and a perfect dodge. These mechanics are simple to understand, but take some practice to master. They add a lot of depth to the gameplay, while still being accessible for the new players. Now, for example, when I fought the Yeti boss during my first playthrough, I was able to defeat it on my second or third attempt. And I did not know that the boss patterns ahead of time, even. But the combat system made it easy to learn as I have played through. The perfect parrying system in particular is quite satisfying. To pull it off a perfect parry, you will need to press the block button at the exact same time as the enemy attacks. If you get it right, you can counterattack for extra damage. Similarly, the perfect dodge mechanics lets you avoid attacks with precision timing and sets you up to hit back. Now, the First Berserker Khazan's stamina is extremely important. Both you and the enemies have stamina bars, and managing stamina well is the key to winning fights. When you attack, dodge, or block, it uses up stamina. If you run out of stamina, you'll be left open to enemy attacks, and you of course will take extra damage. On the other hand, if you drain of enemy stamina bar, you can perform a special move called Visceral Attack or Critical Hit, which deals a massive damage on them. Because I was playing a dual-wielding build, I focused on leveling up my endurance and stamina recovery. This lets me stay aggressive in fights without worrying too much about running out of my stamina. The game's stamina system is simple, but adds a lot of strategy to the combat. You actually have to think a little bit about when to attack, when to dodge, and when to back off to let your stamina recover. Now, the boss fights in this game are pretty great. They're challenging, but I feel they may be even fair, and beating them feels really rewarding. The Yeti boss, as an example, which I already mentioned, it's actually a pretty good example. Its attack patterns were clear and easy to learn, but the fight still felt exciting and tense. The game's combat mechanics really shine in these boss battles, making them one of the highlights of the experience. There are also mini-bosses scattered throughout the game. These fights are smaller in scale than the main boss battles, but they're still fun and add variety to the gameplay. Sometimes you'll come across large open areas that feel like a boss arenas, but they'll just be filled with regular enemies. This unpredictability keeps you on your toes and makes exploration more interesting. The leveling design in First Berserker Khazan I think is well done. The world feels connected and easy to navigate. Exploring doesn't feel like a chore, and I rarely felt lost. As someone who's very picky about leveling design, I was happy with how fluid and intuitive the environments were. While there are always room for improvement, the level design strikes a good balance between being engaged and straightforward. Now, it's quite hard to compare the First Berserker Khazan to other Souls-like games, but it does a good job of standing out. The combat reminds me a little bit of a Lies of P, especially in the perfect parrying system, which felt similar to a parade puppet fight in that game. At the same time, the First Berserker Khazan combines ideas from many different games to create its own identity. It doesn't feel like a direct copy of any other games, which is actually quite good. One thing that's missing though is the jump mechanic. In older Souls-like games, jumping wasn't a big feature, but in newer games, of course like Elden Ring, it actually adds a lot to exploration. Not being able to jump in First Berserker Khazan feels like maybe a little bit of a step backwards, but thankfully it doesn't ruin the experience, since you don't necessarily need it, at least the way the game was designed. Now, if you always wanted to try Souls-like games but thought that they were just too hard, this may be a good start. Its simplified system, fun combat, and fair difficulty makes it easy to get into. There's also a free demo, like I'm experiencing it here, so you can just try it out completely for free. And if you're enjoying this demo, just the full game seems like it's going to be worth to check out. Of course, after playing for 4 hours, I would give the First Berserker Khazan a very high regards. It's not perfect, but it's a very enjoyable game, so far that I've experienced from this demo. Now, if you're new to this genre, like mentioned, this game could be your introduction to the classics of like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and of course Elden Ring. And if you're already a fan of Souls-like games, you might find it a bit simpler than what you're used to, but it still is worth the try. Overall, the First Berserker Khazan is a fun and approachable game that blends the best part of the Souls-like genre while staying unique. If you're on the fence to try, just come on, try out the demo first. It's free and it's a very good pickup point to see if you will get into this sort of a game. Do let me know down in the comments of your own thoughts regarding the First Berserker Khazan demo. Are you going to pick up on I think it was coming out at the end of March? Again, thank you again so much for watching, like and subscribe, see you guys all, and have a wonderful day.